Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. It is the afternoon of Friday, November 1st, 2013. It's All Saints' Day. We had Halloween yesterday, and today is November 1st. It is the hour of the tax Wall Street party. The overwhelming need of our time, an alternative to the bankrupt policies and the despicable personalities of the Wall Street neoliberal Democrats, represented by Obama, and on the other hand, the fascisto Republicans, the tools of the Koch brothers, dedicated to genocidal austerity. The current two-party system is now displayed in its colossal, appalling bankruptcy. We go from the fascisto Republicans attempting to shut down the U.S. government and essentially bankrupt the country, drive the country into national bankruptcy. And the alternative to that turns out to be this neoliberal Democratic Party with heavy elements of incompetence, national policy being made up by Valerie Jarrett and Michelle Obama. One obvious, very dramatic illustration of this, the fact that the food stamp allocation for about 50 million needy Americans, these are Americans who are victims of this economic crisis, the incompetence, the fecklessness of the U.S. ruling class has created a population of 50 million people who live in dire poverty, on the verge of hunger, some of them on the verge of starvation. And given that wonderful situation, we've got, as of today, November 1st, remember, tomorrow's the Day of the Dead, so let's keep in mind the grim portents associated with that. We're going to have the food stamp benefit, SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's going to be cut by between 5 and 8%. And the two parties, the Obama White House, do absolutely nothing. A real president at this point would declare a state of emergency. He'd do something about it. He'd make an emergency appeal to the country. You can't take people who are on the ragged edge of malnutrition, living on spaghetti and beans and whatever else, and then cut their benefit by 5 to 8%. The reactionaries and fascists, of course, say, well, they should be working. There are no jobs, you fascists, and the ruling class has proved incompetent in creating them, right? Your naive assumption that there are always jobs is absolutely beneath contempt, if that's supposed to be an analysis. So the reason that this is happening, and it's happening automatically without congressional action, is that when Obama designed the stimulus, there was a temporary increase in the food stamp benefit, and this is quite proper, as a counter-cyclical measure, extra $5 or $6 billion that will be immediately spent. We've seen studies. There are little towns in Rhode Island and other such places where the local economy even depends very heavily on the food stamp allocation. But now that emergency aspect, 2009 stimulus provision, is running out. And then if we look then at the haggling about the farm bill, which is where the food stamp budget is located, and it damn well better stay there. Don't listen to some reactionary, even if he's a farmer, telling you, well, the food stamp budget should be separated from the farm bill. No way. That's the only way you can leverage these fascisto Republicans, because they're happy to provide farm subsidies, and I'm also for farm subsidies, but they want that for themselves, but they want to make that one-sided, farm subsidies only and no provision for these destitute people. So the Republican proposal in the haggling over the Farm Bill is to cut an additional $4 billion per year out of food stamps for a total of $40 billion over the next decade. And the Democrats are, in principle, they accept the idea of cuts, but they say, well, it shouldn't be quite so draconian. Could there be a more graphic illustration of the absolute despicable bankruptcy of these two political parties? They both agree. The neoliberal Wall Street shill Democrats agree with the fascisto Republicans that there should be cuts, and the only discussion is about the size of the cuts. And let's just look for a minute at some of the horrendous effects. The SNAP program is being reduced as of today by $5 billion. In the District of Columbia, we have 61% of residents use food stamps. They rely on food stamps. There are a lot of veterans. There are a lot of children. There are a lot of people who work, right? If you work at coolie wages in the new low-wage economy of globalization, the new Confederate economy of the United States, you can very easily be employed and also qualify for food stamps. What it means, of course, is that the taxpayer is subsidizing some low-wage, wage-gouging employer who doesn't want to provide a decent wage, and therefore the people working. This is typical with Walmart and so forth. That is being subsidized then by the taxpayer. So they talk free market, and what they really want is a government subsidy. So in the district, we have, 144,000 residents. One quarter of the entire population is getting food stamps. It's up 61% from the beginning of the World Economic Depression. Let's take Montgomery County, Maryland. Now, Maryland, of course, the richest state, and Montgomery County, the richest county in the richest state. It's not the absolute richest county. That is probably Fairfax or Loudoun, Virginia, but still, Montgomery County has had a 183% increase in food stamp reliance, 25,000 up to 71,000, and similarly also in the other D.C. suburbs. So suppose you've got a family of three with very little income, your monthly benefit is going to go down from $526 to $497. It's a $30 cut, but as one observer here in the D.C. government points out, that could be lunch for one person for a week, and it will have an effect on how people access food. So what is this barbaric, backward, horrendous, appalling situation? Killer austerity, genocidal austerity. Because the question now is, they say, well, it's only a 5 to 8% cut, and then it's a $5 billion cut, and if the Republicans get their way, it'll be another $4 billion cut on top of that. How many are going to die? How many deaths? How many trips to Nuremberg for high crimes against humanity? Because that is the accusation. One of the main charges at Nuremberg, other than international conspiracy to wage aggressive war, it is killing people in large numbers by depriving them of adequate food, clothing, shelter, and so forth. So it's time to fight back. It's time to add a new ingredient, the tax Wall Street Party, to counterbalance the bankruptcy of these neoliberal Democrats and the reactionary fascist Republicans. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C., November 1st, 2013. The C-SPAN version of my talk at the National Press Club on the Russian fleets of 1863, that is a talk that I gave on September 24th at the National Press Club, as announced here last week, aired last weekend on C-SPAN 3, and that lecture has now taken its place where it will be permanently archived in the C-SPAN video library. And if you want to do me a favor, go take a look at it on the C-SPAN video library. I am told that my little talk on the Russian fleets is the 14th most watched video on C-SPAN in the last 7 days. And mind you, that's coming from C-SPAN 3, not even C-SPAN or C-SPAN 2, but from the less widely available C-SPAN 3. So go, please, to the C-SPAN website, put in Tarpley, and click on the, it's called Russia's Participation in the U.S. Civil War. And I actually, at the end of the program, I hope to get to a new Brand X book, a new book-length study of Lincoln's foreign policy that contorts itself like the carnival performer to hide the Russian fleet. It's by a guy called Perino, P-E-R-A-I-N-O, and this is a new exercise in fakery on this important topic. But the food stamp crisis. Now, this is not the only evidence of austerity, right? The United Front Against Austerity was founded in New York City 1 year ago this weekend. So we're the United Front Against Austerity, and that is the think tank, the cadre formation, the philosophical group, which has now given impulse to the creation of the Tax Wall Street Party. And this is obviously what is needed. The two U.S. parties are absolutely useless. Obama, as I warned in 2008, the cold, detached, elitist in the Oval Office, indifferent to suffering, full of neoliberal ideology, even after that confrontation with the Republicans over the House Tea Party lunatics shutting down the government and wanting to promote a national bankruptcy, Obama still hasn't closed the door to a grand bargain. He's still offering these despicable unilateral concessions, the chained consumer price index. When somebody asks you what's the chained consumer price index, it's a formula to kill Americans. It's a vehicle for genocide. It is deadly. It kills. Austerity kills. We're still working on actuarial formulas to develop this idea of the death clock, right? The austerity ghouls, the various Peter Peterson, Maya McGinnis, Fix the Debt, Simpson and Bowles, and all the rest of them, they make a big deal out of the debt clock, D-E-B-T. Well, we counterpose to the debt clock, D-E-B-T, we counterpose the death clock, D-E-A-T-H, when you're dead, when you die, when you get killed. And austerity will do that. Now, we've just described this food stamp program. There's one element without which it's not complete. At a certain point, Obama decided that he would siphon off money from the food stamp program, people who are in danger of malnutrition and starvation, and Obama would siphon that money off, and he did it to finance Michelle Obama's First Lady hobby project, her anti-obesity program, which it's a worthy goal, although the way in which she has done it is certainly not very clever. It's ham-handed and coercive. It reeks of, what can we say, paternalism or maternalism in this case. But Michelle Obama was eager to siphon off money from the life or death question of the food stamp program, keeping people alive from one day to the next, to her anti-obesity program, which again is certainly, it's a real problem and deserves to be addressed, but you can't do it by stealing money from food stamps. And we always suspect in the background on this Valerie Jarrett. And if you looked at the the national security wonk, the NatSec wonk, who's now been fired from the National Security Council. He says one of the things that scares him about Obama is that Obama relies on such a cipher, such a nonentity as Valerie Jarrett. So Obama continues to offer the chained consumer price index. I can only say he's incorrigible. He just can't learn. He's got this thing about working across the aisle. And don't look now. The Democratic Party is preparing another round of the same thing. You'll remember in 2008, Hillary Clinton made a big deal about her willingness to fight. She said Obama's notion of bipartisan compromise and working across the aisle is unrealistic, it's naive, it's misleading. But now, don't look now, but Hillary making a comeback here on the front page of the Washington Post, common ground, a potential 2016 theme. The Clintons, both, actually all three, Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea, their stump speeches channel voter frustration with partisan gridlock. In recent stump speeches and policy remarks, Bill Clinton and Hillary Rodham Clinton have delivered sharp criticism of the partisan gridlock paralyzing Washington, signaling a potential 2016 campaign theme if Hillary chooses to run for president. And this includes a kind of a slight, a back of the hand to Obama, who promised to do the same thing. Now, again, this is a degeneration even for Hillary, right? Her 28 line was, if you want something, you got to fight for it. Obama is a naif. And, of course, it's a cover story for being a sellout, right? They all know what this involves. So Hillary is already saying, let's have the neoliberal Democrats coexist with the fascisto Republicans and make concessions to them. And think about how grotesque this is. We've been told by all the Democratic leaders, the Republicans in the House are extremists, they're fanatics, they're anarchists. They are all these things. And now you turn around and you want to give away the store to make a deal with them. No deal. Destroy them in place. Limp along, stall for time, get through to November of next year, and then fix it so the Republican Party is destroyed, permanently gone as a national party capable of controlling the presidency or a majority in either house. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Places Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. Do take a look at my talk, if you haven't seen it yet, on the Russian fleets of 1863. You find that in the C-SPAN video library. Look under Tarpley, Russia's participation in the American Civil War. It was number 14 in the list last week, and it would be nice to get more attention for it, especially since the counterattack of the Brand X pseudo-historians has already begun. So the food stamp program, right, goes back to Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was then permanently institutionalized by McGovern and Dole, and this is too little. Even the current benefit is very, very scarce, but better than nothing. Certainly not worthy of being attacked. But now it's $5 billion cut as of today. Fascisto Republicans want to cut another $4 billion. The Democrats say that's slightly too much, and we say get rid of them. You've got to add into the mix another pole of reality, of program, of agitation, of pro-labor, actual pro-middle class agitation, and that's the tax Wall Street Party. So one way to do that, if you're in New York City, go out this weekend and vote for Randy Credico, or next Tuesday, November 5th. Go and vote for Randy Credico for mayor of the city of New York on the tax Wall Street ticket. We're told, as we heard last week, that the New York City ballot is written in fine print. Remember, they used to warn you, read the fine print. Watch out for those shyster lawyers. Well, in this case, same thing, the fine print rules. But if you look carefully, bring a magnifying glass to the polling booth, and you'll find Randy Credico tax Wall Street party. One of the reasons they did this is obviously they didn't want people to see tax Wall Street party. Tax Wall Street is the idea whose time has come. Go back and look at Franklin D. Roosevelt. He did not artificially prop up the Republican Party of those days, right? The reactionaries of Herbert Hoover and the people who were soft on fascism, soft on Mussolini, soft on Hitler, soft on Tojo in Japan. But he mercilessly destroyed them so that the Republicans were deprived of the ability to impose their backward, barbaric views for an entire generation, right? 1932 to 1968. And now we've got this potential for the same thing, but that's got to be driven home by actual leaders. So the goal is not to prop up the Republicans with a face-saving compromise, but it is their destruction. And their destruction means that they lose their majority in the House, they lose seats in the Senate, and they never again contend for the presidency. Now, of course, the fringe kooks of the Republican Party are just part of the problem. We want the Republicans to be cut down to size, deprived of power. Then we will get a split in the Democratic Party between the neoliberal Wall Street wing, people like Obama, Durbin, Schumer, that leadership. That's one side. But there's this other side, right? There's the variously pro-labor or populist or more radical Democratic Party of Elizabeth Warren on some issues, Alan Grayson on some issues, Marcy Kaptur, DeFazio, and others. It's a minority, but of course it's really potentially a majority. And always remember, the theoretical point of national unity, which is what you want to go for, the national coalition, the bedrock of it is not somewhere between the Republicans and the Democrats. It's well to the left of the Democrats. It's the point where the program reads, uncompromising defense of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, Head Start, WIC, and the entire social safety net, and indeed the attempt and the commitment to increase those benefits because of the needs of the Depression, right? If your 401k was blown out by Wall Street 5 years ago, you've got to have a pension that means something, so the Social Security benefit should be increased. And where do you get that money? Well, if it's on the federal budget, it's the Wall Street sales tax, the 1% Wall Street sales tax, which is again in the news, right? There was a Robin Hood tax festival in the Congress, which is obviously an unfortunate name for a tiny, really miserable excuse for a Wall Street sales tax. But still, it's a springboard to get the discussion going once again. So we're told that, we'll get to Obamacare in just a minute. We need, in addition to the food stamp benefits being restored and indeed increased, we need the Medicare doc fix. That happens every year. It's time to push that away. There is a demagogic proposal now that the Medicare doc fix, to bring the benefits up to some reasonable level, this is now going to be the quality of care, the quality of outcomes. This is ridiculous. These are schemes to chisel. It's got to be fee for service. You provide a service, you get a fee. And that's what people want. Otherwise, you're going to incentivize the denial of care, right? We want to incentivize the giving of care, not the denial of care. So again, the bottom line of all this is the U.S. ruling class and its two parties have struck out. If you got all those unemployed, if you got 50 million people, many of them working, and they're on the brink of malnutrition and starvation, that's an indictment of the ruling class. It's a feckless, incompetent ruling class. They have to go. Their power has got to be radically reduced. So it's time for the Tax Wall Street Party, and it's time to tax Wall Street. Not diss Wall Street, not make Wall Street feel bad. Your goal is not to set up a camp and live in the park. I can see the Koch brothers looking at Occupy Wall Street and say, look, these people want to live in the park or they want to occupy public space. they're going to live under a bridge. That's exactly where our policies will put them. And I remember the newspaper of Occupy Wall Street, Kevin Zeese, wrote that the new revolution is to occupy public space. It's absolutely ridiculous. The new revolution is to tax Wall Street and restore the living standard, the social safety net of the American people with the proceeds from the tax, from the Wall Street sales tax. Now, of course, the goal is not to eternalize everybody on food stamps, far from it. It's then to seize the Federal Reserve and carry out the program that I have advanced, the Tarpley for Fed head meme, which is on the internet. You can see it also on my Twitter feed. Tarpley for Fed head says no to Yellen, no to the neoliberals, no to the Keynesians, no to the Austrians. They're all inadequate. What we need is an initial $5 trillion tranche, and that is a credit stimulus with about $4 trillion going for construction of infrastructure. We're basically close to the estimate of the American Society of Civil Engineers. They say $3.6 trillion. Let's make it $4 trillion. And then the other $1 trillion is to refinance, to roll over the entire student loan debt burden. The least we can do is to make that into 0% loans so that you won't be paying these exorbitant interest rates, which the neoliberal Democrats and the reactionary fascisto Republicans agree that you ought to be paying. Now, in the middle of all this, the Pope, Francis I, the interview with Eugenio Scalfari of La Repubblica, let's just sum it up, the key points. The Pope says the two main problems in the world are youth unemployment and elder neglect. So a job program for youth and no cuts in the social safety net for the elderly. We'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. Now, we're just a few days from Election Day, and that, among other things, is the chance to put the tax Wall Street party even more in the center of national attention. Go, obviously, and vote if you can in the 5 boroughs for Randy Credico, the tax Wall Street candidate for mayor. But now we have to begin to look ahead. We've got to look ahead to 2014 and indeed 2016 and how we fight our way out of this terrible situation. The key to it, of course, is the generalizing of the tax Wall Street party in many places where the time is getting ripe for that. And we should also factor in this perspective that I developed in New York City at the Left Forum back in early June. When you get 7 years into a world economic depression, you get the potential for a mass upsurge. People who say, I've had enough, this damn depression is strangling me, I'm going to go out and fight. From 1929 to 1935 or so, the world labor movement was in retreat. In some places, there was disaster, as in Germany. But by 1936, places like Spain and France and the United States showed an upturn, right? More mass struggle. So we're in a similar situation. From 2008 to 2015 is a 7-year lead. So what we wanted to start doing is going around the country to various people who have been contributing to the United Front Against Austerity, to the Tax Wall Street Party, and get, first of all, a snapshot of what's going on there, and then some ideas on the significance of the Tax Wall Street Party for U.S. and indeed world politics, right? Because this is a model that travels quite well. So let's go. Let's start off by going to Lincoln, Nebraska. Let's go to the heartland, and let's talk to Dan Burdorf, who was present at the founding conference of the Tax Wall Street, of the United Front Against Austerity in New York City just about 1 year ago. And Dan, I know you got an analysis of what's happening there in terms of the Senate seat and just sort of general politics. And this stuff is not widely known. So why don't you start off, tell us all about that.
Thanks very much, Webster. I'm so happy to be on your show. It's a real honor for me. Webster, I got to start off with some very good news here in Lincoln. Just got word a few minutes ago, actually, that we've got a place lined up for as a venue for Mother Agnes Mariam from Syria to come to Lincoln. So this is nearly confirmed. We just are waiting for some confirmation, but the time and date are set 7 o'clock on November the 18th, and I will confirm that and get people that information if they want to follow No War with Syria Rally Lincoln is our event page on Facebook, and we'll have that confirmation up as soon as possible.
All right, now let me congratulate you. Then I have to point out that of the people who showed up at the United Front Against Austerity, Dan is one of the champion organizers when it comes to actually going out and doing things, demonstrations and picketing and public meetings and stuff. He is one of the champions. So here's another example of that.
Well, it's been quite a story for us here, getting Sister Agnes Mariam to Lincoln. She's looked at. It's a bit. We have Lincoln is proud to have one of the oldest statewide peace groups here, but there's a little bit of conservatism in the city, obviously in Nebraska, and some people are thinking that she's a little bit controversial. But we have I think we're going to have a nice venue and a nice presentation for her.
Okay.
So it should be good.
Now you had this lowdown to sass somebody used to be to behave in an insolent, insulting manner, right? But are the voters in Nebraska about to get sassed, or is that not how this guy?
It could be insulting. It could be insulting for us, Webster. I mean, we just had Halloween, and we're full of werewolves and vampires here in Nebraska now. We've got Ben Sass, I think, is who you're referring to. He's running for Senate as a Republican, and he is coming out of nowhere. I don't know why it is that these guys seem to take on a position of university president while they're hibernating or cocooning to have a political run. But we've got this gentleman named Ben Sass. He's just been reported to be the record holder for campaign contributions in Nebraska Senate race. This is surpassing even Bob Kerrey and Fisher last year. So he's quite interesting. He's got a very interesting background and some strange things on his resume. He starts off with coming from Harvard, and then after Harvard, he went to Oxford St. John's. Now, you may know more about Oxford St. John's than I do, but I think it's odd that isn't there? Do you know anything about this Oxford St. John's? I think there's a. You
mean St. John's College, Oxford? Is that it?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Well, it's just one of those, Oxford is a nest of British intelligence. If you're an Oxford Don, that means you're an advisor to MI5, MI6.
Okay. Well, from there, he got a PhD from Yale on domestic policy during the Cold War. So I wonder what he was preparing for when he studied that. I'm not so sure. But then, interestingly enough, after his PhD from Yale, he goes to the Boston Consulting Group, where that's the same place that your listeners, I'm sure they know, that's where Mitt Romney fell in love with Benjamin Netanyahu. And
right, and exactly.
Just a joke. But then from the Boston Consulting Group, he goes to the U.S. Department of Justice, the Office of Legal Policy, where he worked on sharing intelligence between the FBI and CIA. And there he learned that the greatest enemy to America is jihadist Islam. This is all from a article that was on Nebraska Watchdog, a very popular website for covering Nebraska news. And then, so I think his resume is quite strange. He went to policy and research for health and human services under George Bush the second, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there he became the fourth-ranking man in HHS at a very young age. So I'm not sure how you get to be number 4 at HHS in your early 30s. But his job there, strangely enough, was to go to Iraq and work in the green zone and the red zone, working with pregnant women. So that seems quite odd to me. I guess Health and Human Services, they must do a lot of work.
This is a pretty elitist resume, right?
It is.
Harvard, Oxford, Yale. What understanding could he possibly have for a farmer in Nebraska? I don't think any.
Well, he's running kind of on I'm from a small town, I'm a small town boy. And, it doesn't seem to fit. He also has he got in a recent poll, they found that 81% of Nebraskans did not know his name. And again, he does have the largest war chest in Nebraska history. So it's quite strange.
But now, Dan, you got to situate it for us. The two senators right now are who, and is this guy going for an open seat, or what is it that he's going for?
That's absolutely correct. So we have Deb Fischer. She's a senator who won the Senate seat when Ben Nelson left in 2012. She won. She beat Bob Kerrey, who was Nebraska's probably Nebraska's most famous absent son. So he got labeled as a carpetbagger and didn't do very well in that election, which was an upset. And then we have Joe Hans. Joe Hans, you probably remember him as working in the Bush administration in agriculture secretary. Okay, and that seat's
but
open.
Is this an open seat now? Who's leaving to leave the open seat?
Well, right now the leader of the open seat is the gentleman's name is.
Okay, we got to come back in a minute. Okay. We got to get this straight. Is it an open seat, and which senator is leaving if it is?
Okay.
Back in a minute. Welcome back to the second hour of World Crisis Radio, November 1st, 2013. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. Two things to do if you're in New York City. Go out and vote on this coming Tuesday, November 5th, for Randy Credico, the Tax Wall Street Party candidate. Bring your magnifying glass, bring your reading glasses. They cut the typeface from 10-point to 6-point, I believe. It's tiny. It's in the fine print, but it's worth doing. It's worth voting. De Blasio may be a shoo-in, but you want to get some bang for the buck as a protest vote with an actual program to hit Wall Street in the labanza by taxing them, and then use that money for the necessary expansion of the social safety net and services. That's Credico on the Tax Wall Street Party ticket. And then remember, C-SPAN video library. Go take a look at my Russian fleets of 1863, Russia's participation in the Civil War. Look up Tarpley, then Russia. You're going to find it. We're talking to Dan Burdorf here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Dan, I just tracked this down. It's that Johans has decided to leave after first term, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I misunderstood what you were asking. I thought you said who's leading, and I thought you said who's leaving. Yeah, Johans is
he's leaving, so that gives you the open seat.
All right, but now look, yes, sir.
This character Sass,
yes,
this is an elitist, right? He's not going to market himself. Isn't there a Tea Party? What are they going to do?
Well, the Tea Party has yet to make itself clear who's the front runner there. We've got Sass, who he's kind of he seems like a neocon to me based on his credentials, but he's speaking a bit like a Tea Party. I think he might be trying to overlap a little bit. He talks about, this is from the Lincoln Journal-Star of October 8th. He talks about cradle to the grave dependency, and entitlements are saddling offspring with unsustainable generational debt. So he's saying generational debt, which I think he's meaning unmanageable debt. So he blames entitlements and not derivatives and not Wall Street excesses and not even military adventure as the cause of the general debt. So I think he's kind of wearing both hats as neocon and Tea Party. Maybe there's a new breed of Tea Party neocon. I don't know.
They're really not that different.
Right.
Depends on what audience they're talking to. How about the Democrats? Do they exist?
You wouldn't believe that the party that ran Bob Kerrey last year hasn't even got anyone running for Senate yet. They can't find a sacrificial lamb put out for the slaughter yet. There's nothing. They're not putting out anybody yet. We've got a governor's race. We've got a House seat race, and they've got Democrats running in both of those, but no senator yet.
All right.
So
now look, I think the main issue now is we got this Critico campaign, and you know all about the Critico campaign because you were there as a volunteer helping him to get on the ballot so he could go all the way to November. A lot of that was you, right? Your aggressive, going to Harlem and getting people to sign up on these petitions, right? That was a tremendously important thing. How about the ability of the Tax Wall Street Party, that set of ideas, that kind of program, can that gain traction in a place like Nebraska?
Well, I think it can because I think that the Tax Wall Street platform of the two main drivers, it played well in New York, and again, New York was a great team effort too. And the two things that we put on that I think can translate to the rest of the country, to even someplace like Nebraska, would be the taxing Wall Street at 1% and nationalizing the Fed for production. And production in agriculture plays here too. So I think the thing I learned in New York is that when people understand what these two positions are, they're for it. They had a broad appeal. And those are the three things, along with ending stop and frisk and taxing Wall Street and nationalizing the Fed. Those are the three things that we signed up over, I think, around 10,000, maybe over 10,000 signatures on that in New York. I think you could bring that to other places around the country.
Let me just point out historically, right, the Populist Party of the 1880s and 1890s, their high point was in many ways the Omaha, Nebraska Convention in 1890, and they were there demanding things like parity prices, crop insurance, silos so you could store your crop. You didn't have to sell it right away at a bad price. You could wait a couple of months and sell it at a much better price, and other things of interest to farmers. And naturally, the Populist Party was not interested in deflation. They were fighting deflation, right? The crime of 1873, the Specie Resumption Act, the Coin Act, which restored this gold standard, right? A lot of these libertarian fetishists are telling us how great the gold standard is. Well, gold, it's nice to have gold for yourself, but as a gold standard for a country, it leads to deflation. It means that your debt looms larger and larger, and your price goes down, 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 and you're caught in that scissors. And the answer was the Populist Party. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about taxing Wall Street and nationalizing the Fed, you're really appealing to a very deep bedrock understanding that I think people in Nebraska may still have, right, hidden in some corner of their brain, right, underneath all these layers of idiotic Austrian school and Tea Party propaganda.
I believe it's still there, and I also think that appeal is across the board: low income, working class, upper income, well off. Everyone can see the need for those things when you talk about how Wall Street pays no tax, and so I think that farmers, it appeals to a lot of people. And the thing is about UFAA and Tax Wall Street Party is that we do have a program. Our program can even be translated from the national level to the state level. We have lots of programs that can be translated right into your state and be detailed for each state. So I think that there's a lot of chance for this.
There's one of the things also that you want to think about the restoration of the family farm, a renaissance of the family farm as distinct from these huge large combines, and also the idea that the exploitation of farmers happens through these derivative markets, right, through the London ICE exchange and things like this. And if you ban certain kinds of derivatives, you've really created a much better playing field for agricultural producers.
I think that's so true. Yeah, that's a great point.
All right. So hopefully then this is nationally certainly it's the idea whose time has come. So we want to keep in touch with you in the future.
Excellent.
And keep us up to date on this political mess. I'm thinking of a good campaign slogan would be "Don't sass me."
That's great.
Don't sass me.
That's great.
It's kind of dialect, like dialect, but it means don't behave insolently to me, right? Don't insult me. Don't diss me, right? Don't sass me.
Right.
So there's Ben Sass.
And that's what's happening. I think it's a big bamboozlement to try to pull on Nebraskans for like you said, this guy's an elitist, and he's playing the local hero type of position here in Nebraska. It's not going to work.
Now, look, since we got somebody who's that elitist, right? I'm always thinking of the sage of Omaha, right? Warren Buffett, because Nebraska is farms, but it's also this Berkshire Hathaway. Are we right in thinking that Warren Buffett may be a guiding hand behind SAS?
Well, I don't know about that. SAS does have a lot of money, and he's gone. I think it was a 3-month campaign of fundraising for SAS before now. But
okay, the music means we're out of time. We'll see you soon, Dan. Thanks very much. All power to you.
Okay,
and
thanks
good luck
a lot,
organizing for Sister Agnes Mariam on November 18th, 7 p.m. in Nebraska. And we'll be back in a minute. Well, welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Let me get back to that interesting interview by Pope Francis I with Laude Pubblica of Rome, Eugenio Scalfari, who is a liberal, right? A very dubious character, to say the least. But the Pope says to him, look, 2 big problems in the world, youth unemployment and elder neglect. And that would seem to point in a way that is not so comfortable for the reactionary Republicans, and indeed, and certainly not also for the Wall Street neoliberal Democrats. Youth unemployment would seem to say you need a job creation program for young people, right? That would be a special program for people who have not been in the labor market, are unlikely to be hired, and therefore they need a special assist. That might well be on the federal budget in this way that Congressman Conyers has proposed, right, paid for by a Wall Street sales tax, although his Wall Street sales tax is too small. But still, the idea is there. And then the elder neglect. The elder neglect would seem to say, don't cut Medicare, don't cut Medicare, don't voucherize Medicare, Congressman Ryan of the fascisto Republicans, and don't cut Social Security, dear Obama. Take your chained consumer price index and put it away. So that's very interesting. The Pope then goes on to attack what he calls, well, in Italian, liberismo selvaggio. It means wild free trade or wild free market. And it means the Austrian school. Dig it? Liberismo selvaggio, wild free market economics. He says that's bad because it makes the rich richer, the powerful more powerful, and the poor get poorer. And what do you do to deal with wild free market? You need government intervention, state intervention to redress the balance in favor of equality. Now, again, that is extremely ominous for all kinds of reactionaries, but especially the Republican Party most obviously, and the Democratic Party when you dig a little bit below the surface. So we do not have to have a situation where we have a party of aggressive genocidal austerity and then another party of Fabian camouflaged, disguised, treacherous, death of 1,000 cuts austerity. We reject both, and that is the tax Wall Street party. Thank God we've got this alternative now when it is needed most. Let's just look at the Obamacare debate. 55 contractors working separately with not enough coordination, obviously. Who did this? Was it indeed Michelle Obama who got her crony the contract was that this, let's see what her name is. She's an executive of CGI Federal from Canada. Michelle's classmate from Princeton. What's her name? Towns, I believe. So this Towns, obviously, Tony Towns Whitley, TOWNESWHITLEY, Tony Towns Whitley, Princeton, 85, classmate of Michelle, gets the no-bid contract. CGI Federal comes in and botches it in the way that they botch things already in Canada on a smaller scale, the negative selectivity, right? The more you fail, the more you get promoted. And now this is obviously bad news, right? It's outrageous, and it didn't need to be that way, right? Obama, couldn't you pay more attention? We had these reports in previous years that Obama needs a steady diet of adulation or relapses into lethargy and watches sports games on ESPN. Now, that is not good enough. There's got to be hands-on leadership, at the very least, when it's your personal future at stake, if you can't understand anything else. If you can't be loyal to the country, at least be loyal to yourself, and it doesn't seem like he can even do that. Now, of course, the libertarians, the Washington Post today has this interesting cartoon of a Republican congressman sitting in the committee room, congressional hearings, and he's got his trunk in a big bucket of water that's labeled fake outrage from the Republicans, right? The ones who wanted to destroy the government and shut down everything and destroy Obamacare they've now reversed their field, and they're now so upset that Obamacare is not working for those who need it. What a lot of fakery. And the main libertarian websites, we have libertarian websites that have systematically seen a conspiracy behind every event, now suddenly reverse their field and say that if you believe that Obamacare has been sabotaged by the Koch brothers, then you are ripe for a tinfoil hat. And they say that the Koch brothers are, I guess they're eminent corporate citizens. They favor a free market approach. That is simply not true. The Koch brothers do not favor free market approach. The Koch brothers favor whatever approach puts money into the pocket of Koch. And that can be a cartel, an oligopoly, a duopoly, a trust, a no-bid contract. Free market is rube bait. Free market is the slogan that they've been using since the 1940s to hide what is actually simply greed. The goal is not a free market at all, and there has not been a free market since the beginning of the Neolithic age, right? Once you get out of the old Stone Age into the new Stone Age, you've got a state. It means the free market is no longer there. The other thing going on is insurance companies gone wild. Insurance company executives obviously say, guys, we can run wild for a couple of more months. We can do whatever the hell we want and blame it on Obama. Let's do all the things we want to do because the Republicans will help us. We can blame it all on Obama. Now, it turns out, as the Washington Post focuses on today, Medicaid tops private plans in tallies of new signups, right? We got places like Washington State has signed up 50,000 people, Kentucky a similar amount, Oregon 56,000. But the one that people like best is the Medicaid alternative because it's the cheapest. And, of course, that is where the predatory insurance companies don't make their profits. Isn't that interesting? And what it points to is what the American people have wanted all along. Obama gave up on. Obama claimed earlier in his career that he was for single payer. Again, don't call it single payer. Call it Medicare for all. Everybody knows what that means. Single payer, nobody still knows what that means. But Obama was for single payer Medicare for all. Then he said he was for the public option. Then he dropped the public option. It turns out what the American people want is indeed Medicare for all. So let's push ahead to Medicare for all and get rid of these predatory insurance companies. And if libertarians want to stand up for those insurance companies, welcome back to World Radio, Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. And indeed, stay tuned for the U.S. tour of Sister Agnès Mariam Delacroix. I believe she is already starting her public appearances. We'll check that for next week. Just in terms of the overall austerity debate and related issues, all this week, National Public Radio has been playing up comments by Larry Summers, right now that he's knocked out of the running for Fed chairman. Summers is speaking up for more Keynesian spending, investments, and so forth. The problem is, why do it that way? Why insist on doing it that way? Go where the money is. The Federal Reserve is unlimited money, and all you need to do is make sure that the credit that you put out at 0% rates with extremely long maturities, up to and including century bonds, 100-year maturities, if you're buying bonds. But of course, you're putting out the credit through the discount window and the Federal Open Market Committee and so forth. You're doing all of that to get the interest rate on productive loans down to zero. Summers wants more Keynesian spending. This is understood as an attempt to counterattack the Peter G. Peterson, Simpson Bowles fix the debt. Right, the fix the debt is a bunch of plutocrats, and Paul Krugman has been counterattacking them this week in the New York Times. Krugman attacking Fix the Debt, and Maya McGinnis. Maya McGinnis, of course, a super lobbyist, right, who wants to gouge your Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Isn't it interesting, once again, that the libertarians, in terms of what they propose to do, converge with the worst sides of Wall Street, right, the most benighted, exploitative, predatory branch of Wall Street somehow finds an immediate common ground with the so-called libertarians. And this Maya McGinnis, the guineas, she wants a guinea, right? 21 shillings. It's coins, right? Coins, more than a pound. Pound is 20 shillings. Guinea was 21 shillings. That seems to be what she's interested in. So the Obamacare business just it rolls on, and unless and until this website gets fixed. The other thing, of course, the thing about canceling insurance policies for some people. Look, when Walmart puts ads on television saying that the Walmart employees can get medical insurance for $40 a month, what do you think is covered by that? It's probably got a $25,000 deductible and a $500 fee for every office visit. I mean, that is not insurance, right? That's a cruel hoax, a bogus sham to call that any kind of insurance. So those are substandard, right? And that was factored in. But again, the answer is not to design a system to cater to private insurance companies. It is Medicare for all. And if, as it seems likely now, people gravitate primarily into the Medicaid parts of these exchanges and reject the shoddy profits, the shoddy project of the insurance companies, then the American people will have voted with their feet in favor of Medicare for all, right? So why not simply merge Medicaid with Medicare and put those together and make them available to everybody for about $100 to $125 per person per month, with no rationing of care, make up the difference with the Wall Street sales tax, and in the meantime, you'll be seizing the Fed to get an actual broad-based recovery going. Now, again, the tax Wall Street party is for all of this. We got the elections coming up this coming Tuesday, right? These are bellwethers for 2014. In Virginia, it's very likely that Cuccinelli, otherwise known as Cuccinelli, will be defeated. Cuccinelli is a bigot. He's a social conservative, right? And what he forgot was all of his positions on abortion and gays and all the rest of this stuff, that's rube bait. The Koch brothers don't care about that stuff. They're, the Koch brothers in decadent Manhattan can be in favor of any kind of ultra-left social policies they want. But Cuccinelli has somehow gotten the idea that the rube bait is, it's freestanding, right? It stands by itself. It doesn't. So he's gotten himself into this terrible situation where he's alienated the big money business contributors, and Terry McAuliffe, of all people, the genial rogue of the Clinton fundraising machine, is on his way to being the governor of Virginia. You've also got the Republican candidate for lieutenant governor is also a benighted character with these primitive, barbaric social policies. And indeed, Obenshain, the Republican candidate for state attorney general, is equally benighted, although Obenshain has done a better job of covering it up. So, McAuliffe likely to win there. De Blasio likely to win in New York City, but of course, de Blasio is a clone of Soros. This is an example of the counterinsurgency wing of the Democratic Party. And the main thing that could come out of that is some support for Credico on the tax Wall Street Party. And, of course, the media conspiracy, as we've been hearing week by week, the media conspiracy against Credico and the tax Wall Street Party could not have been more seamless. And then in New Jersey, it looks like Christie over Buono. Christie, of course, a goon, a thug, a union buster, an austerity ghoul, but playing on cultural populism. And this is the very dangerous and very bankrupt side of cultural populism that allows this guy to somehow call forth support from blue-collar workers when everything he's ever done in his life has been to put a dagger in the back of the blue-collar worker. Yellen is now pending. Naturally, I say don't confirm Yellen. Little Rand Paul, says that he's put a hold on Yellen. He wants the Fed audited. What could be more pointless? Do we know that the Fed is totally corrupt? Yeah, we know that. We don't need an audit to know that they're corrupt. We need to do something about it. Why don't we leap ahead, figure that the Fed is totally corrupt, and then demand what? $5 trillion in 0% up to a 100-year credit bonds, buying bonds from states in particular, and buying up the entire student loan debt. So you'd be helping the general recovery, and you'd be doing something for the rising younger generation, right? Let's do something for the poor millennials after they've been duped by Obama and betrayed then by the existing parties. So there we are going forward. The audit gets you nowhere. Let's make some substantive demands. It's the difference between process demands, which are interesting to politicians and pundits, and then actual mass traction economic demands. Little Rand could do us a favor if he demanded $5 trillion or even $1 trillion, anything, to get across this idea that the Fed has got to contribute to the recovery. But, of course, that would be violating the Austrian school, so don't hold your breath. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., November 1st, 2013. What can we do for Ted Cruz's father? This is a kind of hysteria which has infected many layers. So you say what you want about Obama, right? Kenya, nobody knows, so fine. But where we can convict Cruz's father of absolute delirium is that he says Obama is a Marxist. Obama is not a Marxist. Obama is a neoliberal. He is a Wall Street puppet. He is controlled by finance capital. He's not for the dictatorship of the proletariat. and the nationalization of the means of production. No, he's for Wall Street domination of the entire society. So poor Ted Cruz's father is being measured for a canvas blazer. Then we have the other controversy. Congressman Grayson of Florida accuses the Tea Party of being the Ku Klux Klan. Well, this is possibly overstated, but you can see what he's aiming at, and, the relevant facts are what? If we take Little Rand Paul as a typical Tea Party representative, we find that he has had two campaign aides and advisors that he's had to fire because of things that get into, you judge for yourself. One is a certain Chris Hightower, who at one point put out some kind of a statement saying, Happy Martin Luther King Day, Happy N-word Day, with an illustration of some kind of a lynching. This was his communications director. Not good. And then we have Jack Hunter, the Confederate thinker, the Southern Avenger, as he called himself, apparently connected to the League of the South, which supports secessionism. And it's interesting, this guy, Jack Hunter, has co-authored books with former Senator DeMint and with Little Rand. Jack Hunter hates Lincoln, celebrates the birthday of John Wilkes Booth. You get the idea. So that is, I'm afraid, too close for comfort. I would recommend there's so much greater precision of expression for Congressman Grayson, but those are relevant facts. And then, of course, we've now got the new charge that Little Rand copies from Wikipedia. There's a statement by him on the internet where he says that he never cheated in medical school, but he would spread false rumors about what was going to be on the test to get the curve down so that he would be able to do better. Well, what can we say? The Robin Hood tax came to Congress. The National Nurses United, and their guy, I think his name is Light, with a bunch of Congress people, including Keith Ellison and Congressman Conyers and so forth. This is about the best you're going to get from the Democratic Party. I would ask Congressman Ellison, if you really are in favor of the Robin Hood tax, right, this awful name, but even if you want to call it that, how come you always go on cable TV and say nothing about it? Is this a throwaway line, or is it a real campaign? Are you devoted to getting this done, or is it just something, once a month you mention it, right, pro forma? So that's not very good. We're going to be talking more about the Kennedy assassination next week, and I guess we better delay most of that. Let's just talk about this Perino book. If you watched the NewsHour on PBS this past week, you saw that they were touting a book called Lincoln in the World. Lincoln in the World by Kevin Perino, P-E-R-A-I-N-O. Kevin Perino, Lincoln in the World. This was also advertised on National Public Radio this morning, right? This is one of those little things at the beginning of the hour. Lincoln in the World by Perino. So it's the study of Lincoln and foreign policy. And if you saw his little interview, 3 minutes maybe, on public broadcasting, PBS NewsHour, he says Lincoln had to deal with England and France and Spain, and the Russian fleet showed up off the East Coast. The Russian fleet showed up off the Atlantic coast. And this is obviously not good, because it sounds like, if you put this in 20th or 21st century terms, right, and Russian submarines showed up off the East Coast, and that sounds very threatening. It sounds almost hostile. Instead, of course, as we have documented in some detail on this broadcast and on C-SPAN, the coming of the Russian fleet was the godsend. What Gideon Wells wrote, thank God for the Russians. and I have argued that we have to at least strongly consider that the proclamation for the original Thanksgiving, the proclamation that went out on October 2nd, 1863, giving thanks, and in the text it is, this civil war, which seems to be an invitation to foreign states to intervene. So far they have not. Well, this is all. I haven't got the complete text, but I've looked at the online version on Amazon. We'll get a full report, but it's this book by Perino seems to focus on Karl Marx. Karl Marx, it's well known. He wrote for the New York Tribune, and or was it the New York Herald? Anyway, one of the two New York papers. And, of course, there's a letter from Karl Marx in his capacity as head of the International Working Men's Association, the first international, to Lincoln, expressing support to Lincoln. Now, he could hardly do anything else, right? If you were part of the wing of the workers' movement in Britain that somebody like Marx was trying to appeal to, if you didn't support Lincoln, your name was mud. So I wouldn't read too much into it, but somehow for Perino, this is so important that Marx and Lincoln were somehow, they were on the same page. I don't think they really were. And then he's got a lot of interesting stuff about Napoleon III. Well, of course, the drama of the Habsburgs going to Mexico, the Emperor Maximilian, who was then executed by firing squad, the Empress Carlotta, who I think she made it back to Vienna and lived almost to the First World War, the Habsburgs, and all this other stuff. But somehow the Russian fleets got lost. I think this is we should probably give Perino a kind of an award for the most elaborate apparatus of avoiding and ducking this crucial question of the Russian fleets, at least based on what I've been able to read, looking through keywords in the Amazon edition and so forth. It's unfortunate, but there it is. And now we're going towards the Kennedy assassination anniversary on the 22nd, and I just want to make maybe one point in the minute or two we have left. The Kennedy project was to revive the New Deal. It was to take the New Deal, which had slowed down, gone astray under Truman, who was really an enemy of the New Deal, and Eisenhower, he might even in some respects be like an administrator, and in some ways good faith, in some ways not, of the New Deal. But somehow the New Deal had run out of steam. Kennedy wanted to relaunch the New Deal, calling it the New Frontier, and above all, to return to Roosevelt's conception of the presidency, a powerful president, not the weak executive of Truman, right? Truman told what to do by Atchison and Harriman in foreign policy and by Clark Clifford and others in domestic policy, right? Not Eisenhower, the genial chairman of the board, with John Foster Dulles doing what he wanted and George Humphrey at the Treasury doing what he wanted. No, a powerful presidency. And I'm noticing that the libertarians are trying to pile on, people like Dr. Jerome Corsi trying to play some kind of a role in denouncing the Kennedy assassination. Just the problem with this is that the Kennedy project was to restore precisely the kind of presidency that libertarians hate the most. So it's not clear what the basis for this very late conversion to Kennedyism, I guess, represents. We'll see you next week on World Crisis Radio. The food stamp benefit, SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that's going to be cut by between 5 and 8%. And the two parties, the Obama White House, do absolutely nothing. A real president at this point would declare a state of emergency. He'd do something about it. He'd make an emergency appeal to the country. You can't take people who are on the ragged edge of malnutrition, living on spaghetti and beans and whatever else, and then cut their benefit by 5 to 8%. The reactionaries and fascists, of course, say, well, they should be working. There are no jobs, you fascists. And the ruling class has proved incompetent in creating them, right? Your naive assumption that there are always jobs is absolutely beneath contempt, if that's supposed to be an analysis. So the reason that this is happening, and it's happening automatically without congressional action, is that when Obama designed the stimulus, there was a temporary increase in the food stamp benefit, and this is quite proper, as a counter-cyclical measure, extra $5 or $6 billion that will be immediately spent. We've seen studies. There are little towns in Rhode Island and other such places where the local economy even depends very heavily on the food stamp allocation. But now that emergency aspect, 2009 stimulus provision, is running out. And then if we look then at the haggling about the farm bill, which is where the food stamp budget is located, and it damn well better stay there. Don't listen to some reactionary, even if he's a farmer, telling you, well, the food stamp budget should be separated from the farm bill. No way. That's the only way you can leverage these fascisto Republicans, because they're happy to provide farm subsidies, and I'm also for farm subsidies, but they want that for themselves, but they want to make that one-sided, farm subsidies only, and no provision for these will be permanently archived in the C-SPAN video library. And if you want to do me a favor, go take a look at it on the C-SPAN video library. I am told that my little talk on the Russian fleets is the 14th most watched video on C-SPAN in the last 7 days. And mind you, that's coming from C-SPAN 3, not even C-SPAN or C-SPAN 2, but from the less widely available C-SPAN 3. So go, please, to the C-SPAN website, put in Tarpley, and click on the called Russia's Participation in the U.S. Civil War. And I actually, at the end of the program, I hope to get to a new Brand X book, a new book-length study of Lincoln's foreign policy that contorts itself like the carnival performer to hide the Russian fleet. It's by a guy called Perino, P-E-R-A-I-N-O, and this is a new exercise in fakery on this important topic. But for the food stamp crisis. Now, this is not the only evidence of austerity, right? The United Front Against Austerity was founded in New York City 1 year ago this weekend. So we're the United Front Against Austerity, and that is the think tank, the cadre formation, the philosophical group, which has now given impulse to the creation of the Tax Wall Street Party. And this is obviously what is needed. The two U.S. parties are absolutely useless. Obama, as I warned in 2008, the cold, detached, elitist in the Oval Office, indifferent to suffering, full of neoliberal ideology, even after that confrontation with the Republicans over the House Tea Party lunatics shutting down the government and wanting to promote a national bankruptcy. Obama, welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. It is the afternoon of Friday, November 1st, 2013. It's All Saints' Day. We had Halloween yesterday, and today is November 1st. It is the hour of the Tax Wall Street Party, the overwhelming need of our time, an alternative to the bankrupt policies and the despicable personalities of the Wall Street neoliberal Democrats, represented by Obama, and on the other hand, the fascisto Republicans, the tools of the Koch brothers, dedicated to genocidal austerity. The current two-party system is now displayed in its colossal, appalling bankruptcy. We go from the fascisto Republicans attempting to shut down the U.S. government and essentially bankrupt the country, drive the country into national bankruptcy. And the alternative to that turns out to be this neoliberal Democratic Party with heavy elements of incompetence, national policy being made up by Valerie Jarrett and Michelle Obama. One obvious, very dramatic illustration of this, the fact that the food stamp allocation for about 50 million needy Americans, these are Americans who are victims of this economic crisis, the incompetence, the fecklessness of the U.S. ruling class has created a population of 50 million people who live in dire poverty, on the verge of hunger, some of them on the verge of starvation. And given that wonderful situation, we've got, as of today, November 1st, remember, tomorrow's the Day of the Dead, so let's keep in mind the grim portents associated with that. We're going to have destitute people. So the Republican proposal in the haggling over the Farm Bill is to cut an additional $4 billion per year out of food stamps for a total of $40 billion over the next decade. And the Democrats are, in principle, they accept the idea of cuts, but they say, well, it shouldn't be quite so draconian. Could there be a more graphic illustration of the absolute despicable bankruptcy of these two political parties? They both agree. The neoliberal Wall Street shill Democrats agree with the fascisto Republicans that there should be cuts, and the only discussion is about the size of the cuts. And let's just look for a minute at some of the horrendous effects. The SNAP program is being reduced as of today by $5 billion. In the District of Columbia, we have 61% of residents use food stamps. They rely on food stamps. There are a lot of veterans. There are a lot of children. There are a lot of people who work, right? If you work at coolie wages in the new low-wage economy of globalization, the new Confederate economy of the United States, you can very easily be employed and also qualify for food stamps. What it means, of course, is that the taxpayer is subsidizing some low-wage, wage-gouging employer who doesn't want to provide a decent wage, and therefore the people working. This is typical with Walmart and so forth. That is being subsidized then by the taxpayer. So they talk free market, and what they really want is a government subsidy. So in the district, we have, 144,000 residents. One quarter of the entire population is getting food stamps. It's up 61% from the beginning of the World Economic Depression. Let's take Montgomery County, Maryland. Now, Maryland, of course, the richest state, and Montgomery County, the richest county in the richest state. It's not the absolute richest county. That is probably Fairfax or Loudoun, Virginia, but still, Montgomery County has had a 183% increase in food stamp reliance, 25,000 up to 71,000, and similarly also in the other D.C. suburbs. So suppose you've got a family of three with very little income, your monthly benefit is going to go down from $526 to $497. It's a $30 cut, but as one observer here in the D.C. government points out, that could be lunch for one person for a week, and it will have an effect on how people access food. So what is this barbaric, backward, horrendous, appalling situation? Killer austerity, genocidal austerity. Because the question now is, they say, well, it's only a 5 to 8% cut, and then it's a $5 billion cut, and if the Republicans get their way, it'll be another $4 billion cut on top of that. How many are going to die? How many deaths? How many trips to Nuremberg for high crimes against humanity? Because that is the accusation. One of the main charges at Nuremberg, other than international conspiracy to wage aggressive war, it is killing people in large numbers by depriving them of adequate food, clothing, shelter, and so forth. So it's time to fight back. It's time to add a new ingredient, the tax Wall Street party, to counterbalance the bankruptcy of these neoliberal Democrats and the reactionary fascist Republicans. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., November 1st, 2013. The C-SPAN version of my talk at the National Press Club on the Russian fleets of 1863, that is a talk that I gave on September 24th at the National Press Club, as announced here last week, aired last weekend on C-SPAN 3, and that lecture has now taken its place where it